Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. What's the creepiest thing you've ever seen while out in the forest? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
A buddy of mine had just bought a camera and liked playing around with an exposure open. Not sure about the terminology, but it's kind of a technique to make light look stretched and probably a billion other possibilities. So we took a couple of colored plastic cups and went out to a part of the woods where we knew there would be a trail we could walk down. It was close to midnight because we wanted it to be dark out to be able to see the effect of the light. Me and a friend held the cups over our heads and used the flashlights on our phones to light up the cups. I had a phone that I had to start recording to be able to use the flashlight, and so I did. The plan was to start at the top of a hill and walk down the trail toward the camera to create sort of a string of light. People who know stuff about cameras, feel free to correct me. As we started to walk down the hill, me and my buddy started chatting, but quickly I noticed his eyes were wide open, looking at me as if I were a werewolf had emerged right behind me. Naturally, I said, "What?" Getting really scared immediately as well, and we got totally quiet. He said in a high-pitched whisper, screaming type of voice, "You don't hear that?" And then I heard it, the sound of laughter from kids not older than 6 years old. Both of us panicked and started running down the hill, and we got to our friend with the camera way too early. And he says, "What the hell are you doing? You have to walk slowly toward the camera or you'll ruin the shot." We told him that we heard kids laughing in the woods, and he didn't believe us. Naturally, but I realized that I had the camera running, so maybe it caught something and played it back to him. The microphone picked it up perfectly. 2 or possibly 3 kids around 6 years old or so. In the middle of the woods, no house or guardian or light in sight. Needless to say, we noped right out of there. We were playing manhunt, and we saw something swinging from the trees, like a dark brown black creature swinging. Never saw it again. Then years later, when I was in high school and working at a sub shop, my coworker and I were the only ones on, and we're talking about the time he was walking through the woods with his friend and saw something swinging through the trees, and described the same thing. The woods connected, too. I was in a different set of woods around a park, and it's old Native American grounds or something. Lots of my city is. But I was talking to 3 friends, and was the only one facing a certain direction. All of a sudden, I see a fluorescent green person running, almost like a full reflector suit, but as he got maybe 20 yards away, it disappeared mid-stride. In elementary school, someone had put up posters that their dog was missing. One afternoon, the class was begging the teacher to go outside and play Capture the Flag. Teacher finally gives in and takes us to the forest beside the school. The class split into 2 teams, and we started playing. Lucky me, I'm running through the forest by myself, and come across said missing dog, dead by some bushes. I ran to tell the teacher, who looked stunned, and before I knew it, the game was over, and we were headed back to the school. I was about 6 or 7 years old and lived in an apartment with my parents. Just behind us, there was a woody area and a soccer field. In the night, we were going to visit my grandma for her birthday, and as a kid, I wait with my parents outside while playing with God knows what thing, a rock, a bug, whatever. Suddenly I look at the woody area, and a big light just appears like 20 feet in front of me, like parking vertically. I run to tell my parents what I just saw, and my dad told me while laughing, maybe it was a UFO. Today I'm 27 and still remember that brightness, the most bright thing I've ever looked at. I once went with my family on a picnic in the woods in Lebanon, where I was raised. We're Muslims, and we were in the Christian area, so we were already a bit on edge. We find an old abandoned home from a couple of centuries ago, with a grave in front. Literally the type of settlements you'd find the ghost in the well in the early part of Witcher 3. Me and a couple of my cousins ventured a bit deeper, and we found a tree stump with nails and teeth all over it. I told my older brother, and we were asked to leave it alone and go back to our parents. It was definitely teeth. There were no less than 30 teeth hammered into the stump, with much more nails. Somebody decided to make a road marker by stringing up parts of a skeleton, the backbone and rib cage of some animal, and there were baby toys tied to it. The guy I was with, who was a forestry worker in a nearby forest but not that one, was totally nonchalant about it, and so was everyone else, but it freaked me out. Someone else I knew found a thick, dirty chain hanging from a tree in the middle of the woods with a shotgun shell nearby. We have a lot of missing girls here. The cops are investigating. Lived on a decent-sized family farm in central New York as a kid. We owned about 120 acres, half of which was woods, and we lived right across the road from about 3,000 acres of state forest, with miles of hiking and snowmobile trails throughout. Mid-December, a couple of years ago, I was out checking the fencing. It's 8 or 9 p.m., and it gets pretty dark early in the winter up there. So I'm walking the fence line along the dirt road that separates our land from the big old state forest on the other side, when I noticed this light out there in the trees. First thought was a snowmobile, of course, makes sense, but it wasn't moving. There was no sound. Anyone who's been out at night in a fresh snowpack can attest to how quiet it is. All the snow just dampens the noise, but snowmobiles, even when idle, are loud as hell, and I heard nothing. I stopped and watched it for a bit, felt really long, and I finally decided I'd yell over to them, assuming it was someone having engine trouble or something, and ask if they needed anything. Second I opened my mouth, the light started moving fast, and I could see it passing behind trees, sometimes fading as if it was moving away, and sometimes coming so close to the road, it lit up the bushes a few feet in front of me. And then it just slowly faded back into the woods and out of sight. Never a single sound. I left for college just a few months later, but I let my dad check the fencing on that field after that, and I avoided those woods like the plague. I'm sure it must have just been some guy with a headlamp or something, maybe a cross-country skier out late at night with headphones on. I'm sure there's a practical explanation, but you go stand out on the edge of a pitch-black forest with no sound but the sprinkling of falling snow around you, and watch a white-blue ball of light tear through the trees, and tell me how long you could stand there feeling safe. A fridge with stuff still inside. It was absolutely a white girl in a horror movie moment, LOL. I was on a road trip with my best friend from Florida, and GPS told me to take a certain state road. It was literally a dirt 2-tire track road through a forest, but GPS knows best, I guess, LOL. As we went along over stones and potholes, there was another dirt road that intersected ours. I, driving, happened to look to the left and see a fridge and a few random things just off the side, and my first thought was, there's definitely a dead body in there. So I pulled off, had my friend get in the driver's seat in case anything happened, and got out to check myself. First sign should have been the smell and flies, but I had to know. I was on its side, and I pulled the freezer door open, and good God, I don't know how I didn't puke. There were definitely Ziplocs and grocery bags full of something in there, but I was a little disappointed I didn't see a disembodied head roll out, LMAO. It was August 2019 in Russia. Me and my bestie decided to explore an abandoned camp deep in the woods. When we finally got there, a weird man stepped out of one of the buildings and saw us. 2 teenage girls, absolutely frightened. He asked us to leave the area because we had nothing to do in there. I mean, yeah, he was right, but we continued our little investigation anyway. It was obvious that the camp wasn't as abandoned as we thought it'd be. I took lots of pictures, and everything was fine until we saw another man walking right in front of us without actually noticing us. It was pretty scary because we couldn't even call anyone. We were in a damn forest. Thank God we managed to slide out of there without running into anyone. I have no idea why they were living in that camp, right in the middle of the huge forest. Maybe they were escaped criminals or something, I don't know, but now I understand that the most horrible thing you can possibly see in an abandoned place is another person. On vacation, and there were some woods near our hotel, found a path near the edge and followed it for about 15 minutes. Small clearing where there was like a mini campsite, fire ring, logs pulled up to sit on, and about 15 purses and various stuff dumped out of them. Apparently, someone, or a group of people, used to steal purses and then take them back to this spot to take anything valuable out of them. Found a bunch of pea maps, and a couple of times. First time, they were soaking wet and worthless. Second time, someone had left them recently, and they were in good condition, different locations. Walking along a tree line beside a river, there was a huge tree that had 3 catfish heads, each with a single nail driven into it. No bodies for the fish, just the heads nailed to the tree, probably 6 or 7 feet from the ground. Looked like they had been there for a while, and the skin looked kinda leathery. Oh, I have one. I'm an ornithologist, and in a previous job a couple of years ago, I was out on a bird survey in a remote part of southwest Scotland. I was following a fence line through the forest to the top of a hill where I would be able to get a good view of the landscape. The fence turned a right angle at the top of the hill, with the forestry on one side and open landscape on the other. Tied to the corner of the fence was a plastic bottle. I immediately assumed that it was a geocache and opened it up to write my name and date. Inside were some pieces of rolled up paper secured with a crumbling elastic band. I opened it up and realized very quickly that this was definitely not a geocache. The note read as followed. This is word for word except for the dude's name. I photographed it. Dear Sir or Hunter, hi, I'm Thomas, and here's my details, so as you will know me if you see me around here. Age, 40s, pale, 5'7", soft, tender body, smooth skin, chest 35 inches, hips 37 inches, bum cheeks 39 inches. Please phone if interested in meeting, or if you know any gent that is. I have upper body and arm weakness, and slightly weakling look, and no friend or relative in closest lifestyle. I can meet here or Moore's Cafe, or anywhere in UK, even on frosty mornings for a hunter. P.S. I'm inexperienced apart from some meetings with a gent in his garden shed in 1993, but I was always tied up while he put something down my bladder, and it got too painful. There was also a small piece of paper with a very grainy black and white photocopy of a side-on view of a man with his hands tied above his head, but his eyes had been cut out, leaving a tiny rectangular hole in the paper. On it, the words were written too dark and blindfold. Being a 27-year-old lone female and the only human for miles around, it was fair to say that I was a bit creeped out. But then I reasoned that A, the bottle looked as though it had been there for quite a long time, and B, I was probably not his type anyway. I reassembled the contents of the bottle, left everything exactly as I found it, and noped back down the hill to continue my bird survey. I've never found anything like that since. Good luck to the guy, I guess. Not necessarily creepy, but it gave us quite a jump. When I was younger, my brother and I and one of our friends were exploring in the wooded area behind our house. We were following the creek when all of a sudden we turn a corner and see a crashed conversion van plowed nose first into the embankment. The walls of the canyon were about 20 to 30 feet high. The crash scene looked pretty recent. Our first thought was God forbid that there were bodies inside, because the damage to the front was pretty severe. It took us about half an hour to muster up the courage to peek inside. It was empty, thank God. Turns out, after our parents called the police, we found out it had been stolen from the next town over a couple of days prior. The thief got spooked somewhere along the line, put it in neutral, and pushed it down the first hill he could find. Stationed in Okinawa, Japan in 2005, found a cave while exploring the jungles on Hamahiga Island full of human bones inside large clay jars. In the very back of the cave was a small hole I could crawl through, leading to another chamber. I squeezed through that, and the cave dead-ended into a small area, just low enough so I couldn't stand up. On the back wall, stuck into the limestone, was a single taper candle, which looked like it had just been lit, as the wax had just started to melt. I decided now was a good time to leave. I asked some Japanese friends about it, and they said during the war, hundreds of people died on that island, but nobody was left to identify them or pay to bury them, so all the bodies were just stuffed into this cave with no markers. Still doesn't explain the candle, though. Mourner. I was hiking around 1990-ish, good ways away from any civilization. About a mile away from the nearest road was suddenly an entire small neighborhood's worth of streets, clean paved asphalt, curbs, sewers, fire hydrants, and driveways that led to nothing. No houses, just the rest of the old-growth forest. It was like someone was going to build a suburban neighborhood, installed the infrastructure, and just didn't build homes. I couldn't even see how they got in the construction equipment to do that. There was dense forest all around with no obvious paths or anything. At one end of a street, there was a cul-de-sac. There was one lone abandoned school bus that had evidence of someone living in there at one time, including a campfire area, old mattress, beer bottles, etc., but it didn't look like anyone had been there recently. A few years ago, when I told this story for the first time, I looked up where it was on Google Maps, and now there is some kind of suburban complex, because the city's sprawl has reached out far into the country now. So all I can think of was that they built this whole area, then sold lots or something, making people build their own houses or something, but I'll never forget that, definite Stranger Things territory.
I spent half a year in Okinawa at Camp Schwab back in the late 90s, and although this is not the same island, the way you described it, but a couple 100 meters off the shore of Schwab, you could swim to an island, or kayak, I guess, if you wanted, and they had these little underground tunnels you can kind of swim into and shoot out of. It was great, and not everybody could make it there because it was a moderate swim. Been there a few times, and a lot of little mini caves in there. I don't think it's the same island, but I didn't see any bones. But either way, kind of brought me back, so thanks for sharing. Also, I saw this thing, you can hype a video. So if you can hype this video, I'd appreciate it. We all would. Thanks again, guys.
I used to go over to my friend Ray's house as a kid. We made little paths through the woods behind his house and would run through them every time we hung out. We knew those paths like the back of our hands. One day, we ran back there, and we somehow got very lost. We were in a place we had never seen before. It had these very open spaces between very large trees. In the middle of one of those openings, we spotted something weird. It wasn't no tree. We crept behind a trunk and peeked over to see a desk in the middle of the woods with a man slouched in a chair with dark glasses, a fedora hat, and a large black coat on. We were scared shitless. This place was half a mile away from Ray's house, and nobody else's house was anywhere close to this shit. How did he get out here with a desk? Suddenly, the man sat up straight and snapped his head toward us. We ran for our lives through the underbrush. At some point, we got separated, but I kept running toward Ray's house. I got to his house to find him running out of the woods on the opposite side of the house. We had made it back safe, and the man didn't appear in the tree line. A few days later, we went back to that same place. There was no desk and no man. We checked several other times, but found nothing. It confused us so much. Honestly, I cannot explain that day. It's the one thing in my life that makes me open to the idea of the supernatural. When I was young, we had family friends who lived in the country with tons of land, creeks, and woods, but their land had a gravel road close to their house, so occasionally you might see another car or someone riding their horse pass by. Well, one night, when I was probably 7, we all slept in their treehouse that was between the house and the road. Around 2 a.m., we woke up to voices, so we peeked over the treehouse railing and saw 2 men in white pointy hats and sheets cross their back pasture woods and leap their barbed wire fence and walk down the road. Next morning, we told the adults and they thought we were just being kids and imagined things. We decided after breakfast to go walk down to the creek that crosses the gravel road and explore some more woods. Once we got into that set of woods, we discovered someone had butchered 2 of their cows, like heads in different places, a tail over here kind of thing. It was like a bloodbath massacre. To this day, I wonder who those men were and if it's related. Guys, seriously, I have no idea who to tell about this. I grew up in Allentown, New Hampshire, directly behind Bearbrook State Park, where a serial killer known as Terry Petter Rasmussen is known to have murdered 4 people and disposed of their bodies behind a trailer park in the 80s. ABC 2020 has a documentary about him called The Chameleon Killer. Anyway, as a miserable kid, I used to walk the woods a ton. In that time, I'm pretty sure I saw more barrels up in the woods, at least 2 or maybe 3, and there were still people missing in that case. The problem I have is that I don't know what to do with this information. I was a kid. They could be false memories, or maybe I was in a junkyard somewhere and that's where I saw the barrels or something. Maybe I'm blending 2 memories together or something. I don't know. But here's the thing. I remember questioning myself more about why are there barrels all the way up in the woods than the memory of seeing them. But I do distinctly recall looking at the first one, about 50 yards away up the hill, sunken into the soil at an angle from age and weather. I remember looking around at context clues and thinking that if a factory were ever here, I should see remnants of an old foundation, power lines, old road crumbling, pollution, but nothing, just woods and a creepy barrel. So I walked away. That creeps me out to this day, and has bothered me ever since I found out there was a serial killer in that area less than 2 miles away. Another barrel I found was maybe 20 feet off the trail, 3/4 of the way buried on its side, but it looked like rain and weather had uncovered the top a few inches from soil erosion. I was on my bike that time, I think a few years older, and I just rode away. The third time I found a barrel lid. Here's the thing. I do not trust the New Hampshire Allenstown PD. Something fishy is going on. They haven't put much effort into the case. Most of the discoveries had been from private researchers or true crime enthusiasts trying to bring closure. In my experience, Allenstown is a miserable small-town America-type place with a town full of people who all have secrets and who don't take kindly to outside people asking a bunch of questions. If you watch the videos and podcasts, you'll hear others say the same thing, and I unfortunately lived there for 18 years until I escaped. NHPD has only been back to the location once, hasn't canvassed the greater side of the forest, and it took them almost 20 years to find a second barrel and just a few yards away from the first. Even the PD themselves admit it was embarrassing. They also have released next to nil about their findings other than they are still investigating. I don't know. This has been bothering me for years. I don't know what to do. I don't want to kick off a huge investigation if I'm wrong, and it's all a mix of childhood memories blurring, but also evidence could be deteriorating. People deserve to know what happened to their loved ones, and no one's final resting place should be in a lonely, abandoned barrel. Not forest, but several acres of woods behind my dad's old house in the country. I played paintball in those woods a lot with friends, so I was out there every weekend. A few nights during the week, our dog seemed on edge, staring out the glass slider, unable to lay down or sleep. It put us all on edge, but we figured it might have been deer in our backyard or some other animal. We ignore his behavior and the strange feelings we were getting. That weekend, I was out in the woods, and at the edge of the woods, maybe 3 to 4 feet in there, were a few empty buckets of KFC. Nothing left but the bones. From that spot, you could see right in our house through the sliding glass door. Someone had been sitting there, ate chicken, and watched us in the pitch dark, in the frickin' woods, in the middle of nowhere, in the dead of night. Still creeps me out. Not much. In the middle of the day, I went into the forest with my little bro and dad. The forest was right at the end of our town. 20 to 50 minutes in, we found a burnt-down factory-like looking building. It had no roof, and only 2 of the 4 walls remaining. It was less scary than cool. It was right behind a dried-out river, about 5 meters deep. My dad went in first to see if he would sink or just walk on the ground. Then we followed. We may have been collecting mushrooms, but I'm not sure. Sadly, my dad turned into a dick a few years after that, and wasn't such a great father anymore. Although he gave me a good start to life. Right now, he is suing me to not pay any more child support. Oof. Not exactly a forest, but a decently large swath of woods in between a major commercial district and some suburban housing. Near the edge of the woods, along a cliff, top of the cliff, was a back of a strip mall. There was a smashed-up car. It was bright red from maybe the late 80s. It was obvious that it fell from the cliff and never recovered. The car itself wasn't too weird. During my teenage exploration of these woods, I found a total of 6 cars, my favorite being a fully intact sedan from the 40s or 50s. Not wrecked or looted or anything, just rotting away in the middle of the woods. These woods were littered with so much crazy stuff, it was really interesting. What made the sedan terrifying, though, was that there were a bunch of human-sized bones about 30 feet away. Upon the discovery, I panicked a bit and immediately left. Came back the next day after sleeping on it so that I could call the police and give them an accurate location. As I got to the location, I examined it a bit further and found the skull hidden in a nearby bush. Thankfully, it was a deer skull, complete with antlers. TLDR. Wrecked car with bones nearby. Found out later that the bones were merely of a deer. Still scared me for a solid 24 hours, though. I used to live in rural Canada, and we had a lot of forest surrounding our house. My dad and I went out one day just for fun of it. We were walking and saw 2 bucks fighting in a clearing. They were being very aggressive, and we both expected one to kill the other. Out of nowhere, they both stopped dead and looked in the same direction we were looking. It wasn't like the snappy head turn they would normally do, but it was a really slow and deliberate, like they were trying to move as little as possible, yet still see something just past the trees. They stood there for a good 30 seconds, and then bolted in opposite directions. I still have no idea what they were looking at.